Welcome everyone, this is Tactical here. It's been quite a long while, but today we are back for another Total Warhammer 3 online multiplayer army build video with a front line of Kossars, a bunch of Kossars with spears guarding double Little Groms. A few weeks back, a viewer suggested me to do a double Grom army build to test it out against a bunch of demon armies, and that is exactly what I did. However, it is not exactly the easiest time to find land battles online, so it took me quite a few weeks to get the build tested out. And today, fighting up against Rocket Rogue's Khorne army, this is going to be our first battle. And after that, we have a second battle against Tzeentch also. The opponent is also Rocket Rogue, but the build is completely different. Basically, two great indicators of how Little Grom can perform in two completely different scenarios. Now let us have a look at the Khorne army build with a very fast and aggressive army. A front line of Khorne warriors with dual weapons. On the flanks we have a bunch of Fleshhound spams, and in the skies a couple Furies backed up by a couple spawns of Khorne. So basically a very aggressive rush army, aiming to crumple my front line and push straight into the back line. While in the front line, I will be harassing them with the horse archers, hoping to use their mobility and those missiles to chip away the health of the lightly armored Fleshhounds of Khorne. As for the leadership, my opponent brought a Herald of Khorne and double cultists, only one of them bringing a summon, as due to the rule changes on the Antiquity ladder these days, you cannot bring duplicate abilities that are selectable, so you can only select and bring one single Gate of Khorne summon. Anyways, that is all for this battle's army build. Let's get into the action and see how double Little Grom performs against this fast aggressive Khorne army. Right from the beginning of the battle, the Khorne army rushes forward, quickly closing in the distance between the Kislev front line and their own forces, especially with the Fleshhounds lunging straight for these horse archers, and my plan to kite the Fleshhounds went horribly wrong, with horse archers only having 92 speed and the Fleshhounds having 95. The Fleshhounds are easily catching up with my skirmishers, especially with the charging acceleration, and then there are the Furies dropping in and the other unit of Fleshhounds charging in as well, forcing me to respawn with the winged lances to pin in these Khorne mobility. And the back we have the Kossars pouring in those arrows, trying to chip away the lightly armored demons, but on the other flank there are no mobility to oppose these huge forces of Fleshhounds and Furies, and they are going for the flank, while the main front line is still marching forward with the spawns and the warriors with dual weapons. Have been taking some damage from the Little Grom firepower. You can see that one cannonball right there smashing apart a few of the warriors, but that is just not enough damage. The damage output speed is rather slow on these Little Grom units. As a result, the Khorne infantry actually made it into melee relatively intact. They took some damage but nothing too substantial. That means the Khorne forces retained enough strength to basically crump my entire front line as soon as they get into combat. You can see that one of the Kossars is already buckling under the spawns, and then the slower Chaos Warriors followed up with a brutal charge, obliterating the remaining infantry. While at the back, the Furies dropping in, silencing the Little Groms for now, while the Fleshhounds are so cost effective as a mobility unit, crumping all these Kossars with spears. Even with the anti-large, they are just no match for the War Beast of the Khorne forces. And then there's the second unit of Fleshhounds tying down the other Little Grom who try to pull away from combat to go into firing position yet again. So I will be pulling in some Kossars with spears and the winged lances, hoping to pin in these Fleshhounds. But the rest of the infantry line are basically collapsing. For the Kislev forces, the warriors of Khorne with dual weapons are unopposed with their heavy armor and anti-infantry bonus, and then the horse archers are simply not doing the damage fast enough, and then there are of course Fleshhounds hot in pursuit, basically right behind their tails, and the speed acceleration will help them easily catch up. So the horse archers are probably not going to survive this one. And then Boris, not having exactly the best engagement so far. He is anti-large and he will do a lot of damage against the spawns of Khorne, as well as the armor dishing out damage against the warriors. But he is more of a duelist character that he wants to go fight some big juicy single entities like the Bloodthirster or even Scabrand himself, and against all these multi-entity units, he is not exactly maximizing his value here. You can see that he's still very healthy, but the rest of the army is basically collapsing. There are a couple stray shots from the Little Grom, crashing a few of these warriors and spawns, doing some nice damage, but there is just not enough stuff to protect the artillery, as the warriors and the flash hounds are just flooding this backline. No more stuff to guard the artillery, and then the horse archers are being chased off by the flash hounds. There's nothing to fight them at this point, and you can say that the Kislev forces are basically all but lost. And so let's fast forward, as the Little Grom didn't even manage to use up half of their ammo and just basically tied down by this extremely fast and aggressive rush. The expensive, non-cost effective Kislev infantry, not that I'm saying they're bad, but the fact that they are spending a bunch of funds on the ammo instead of pure melee holding power makes them having a little bit less melee prowess than the same tier infantry at around the same cost. So overall, the fast and aggressive push basically crumped all my front line there, and I do not have enough mobility to counteract all the flash hounds, and this will be even worse against Tzeentch, where they have a light and fast mobility spam that can just easily overrun the Kislev backline and swarm those Little Groms, silence them, and the Little Groms, who do not have exactly the fastest damage output speed, well, they're not going to earn back their value, just like here. Even against the slower Khorne with the more narrow mobility forces, they simply cannot dish out enough damage against the slower infantry, the armored warrior of Khorne. Now imagine fighting against Tzeentch, where Little Grom is wasting all its firepower on some lightly armored cheap chaff of the Tzeentch army. They will have an even harder time to earn back their own value. Now let us have a quick look at the army performances, and then we will be moving on to the second battle, with the Little Grom doing some great damage value against the expensive Chaos Warriors. However, some of them are basically shots coming from the cannons after they got tied down, and before that they basically didn't do enough damage to whittle down all these Chaos Warriors. And the front line simply cannot withstand the might of Khorne infantry, collapsing the moment they got charged by these dual weapon warriors. And then the mobility simply wasn't enough to counteract so many flash hounds and furies, and basically got swarmed into position. Boris is a great melee fighter, but there are no good targets for him to fight, being surrounded by infantry and monsters, and then just surrounded by single entities as well. He basically got outnumbered, surrounded, and whittled down. So for a short conclusion, you don't want to bring a double Grom army build against fast and aggressive factions like Tzeentch and Khorne. Unlike the Nurgle mortars, Little Groms cannot weaken the enemy infantry enough before they reach the front line. They are also extremely expensive, diverting funds away from your infantry forces. As a result, your infantry front line will be rather thin, given that the hybrid units of Kislev are usually more expensive than infantry with similar holding power. Anyways, that's all for the first battle. Let's move on to the second one. Now we are at the second battle, with me playing as the Kislev and Rocket Rogue again, leading the Tzeentch army. For the army builds, we have a front line of armored Kossars backed up by a bunch of Kossars, and at the back spear Kossars to protect the flanks and rear. Now this is not exactly a legal army build, as we have now 13 missile units, including the double Little Groms. We forgot to turn on the unit cap when we play the game, so we have one extra missile unit. If you want to make this legal, basically switch out a Kossar unit and replace it with dervishes, and you should be able to fight in regular multiplayer battles just fine. At the back we have two winged lancers as the mobility guarding the rear, and then for the leadership we have the Ice Witch of Lore of Ice, bringing a few spells including the Ice Maiden Kiss, Crystal Sanctuary, and Heart of Winter, and also the Glacial Blast as the item. Basically trying to go for a cheaper leadership core so as to save up more funds for the thicker and wider infantry line we're bringing right now. For our opponent here, with Rocket Rogue bringing a very numerous but also a slower grindier build, with a front line of blue horrors mixed in with Forsakens and backed up by pink horrors of Tzeentch. They are basically focusing in terms of firepower and trying to rain down all those Tzeentch missiles onto my front line. I'll be countering this with my own missile spams. This is basically a Khorne buffet, armored, spears, no spears, and armored. You name it, you get it. Now, for the Air Force, they will be a great threat to my cavalry with a bunch of screamers. 4 of them, in fact, anti-large armor piercing, great at hunting down all those Kislev armored cavalry. And we also have a single Herald of Tzeentch, bringing no other spells, but only blue fire. A very powerful missile spell that can snipe out my key targets, including the Little Groms and my leadership. Anyways, that's all for the army builds. Let's now get this show on the road. Just like all artillery, the Little Groms will be opening up this battle with a bang, actually 2, with both shooting at the formations of the Tzeentch army, smashing a few blue horrors on the way in, and also some Forsaken, but unfortunately, the shields of these Tzeentch infantry actually absorbed a lot of that damage, only taking out 10 models on here, 5 models on this side. Still, damage is damage and they will be losing the protection afterwards, so the second shots and third shots will be much more effective. And unfortunately for the Screamers, they actually got clipped by a shot aiming at the Forsaken and the Blue Horrors and losing their shield as well. But that is not exactly a lot of damage and they can just quickly pull back and regenerate that shield. While on this end, the Forsaken is getting pounded by those Bear War Sled artillery. And my infantry will also be moving forward to screen out the Tzeentch infantry, though unfortunately for the armored Khorne, it seems that there is a bit of friendly fire from the Little Grom here, clipping the formation and basically blasting away 10 models of the unit. Still, we'll be pouring in the arrows and whipping out the pistols, shooting at the lightly armored Blue Horrors who have now lost their shield and are just receiving all the crossfire from the Kislev side, down to half health already, while the Forsakens will be charging forward, hoping to shut down my missiles before too much damage can be done to the pink and blue horrors. And on the second unit of Forsaken, these guys took some massive damage from the Little Grom firepower, and the third one got engaged into combat, plowing their way through a bunch of armored Khornes. Especially with the fire support from the Blue Horrors and Pink Horrors, they should do quick work of these Forsakens. Still, the counterfire from the Khorne and also the Little Grom will be dishing out some massive counter damage, while the armored Khorne, despite not winning that melee fight, they are acting as a crucial speed bump, sacrificing themselves to hold back that Tzeentch army push. Now on the other front line, the Forsaken push are quickly repelled due to all this firepower from both the Khorne and also Little Grom, smashing apart all these Forsakens of Tzeentch, already routing this unit. On the other side, we have the other unit wavering as well. A third unit also receiving massive damage from the missile attacks and on the verge of breaking, as Kislev's Double Grom and Khorne infantry are able to fire away, while Screamers being countered by cavalry and spears failed to shut down the Kislev artillery. The Tzeentch Herald has been spamming the blue fire spell, sniping out my Ice Witch down to 1496 HP. She is being forced into wavering territory, proccing that Barrel Blood effect, and being forced to use up all the spells as early as possible before she'll be routed by that dedicated push from the Screamers. So Heart of Winter draining the health of a bunch of Screamers and Forsaken, and then spamming whatever she can get onto enemy units, including the Snow Leopard summon. Although thankfully we have successfully dragged down all these Screamers and our backline is secured, our Little Groms are online again and they are free to fire into any densely packed enemy infantry. As for our infantry push, after defeating the Forsaken, these armored Khornes are pushing forward, moving into position to shoot into the flanks and rear of these Blue Horrors who have used up all their ammo, forced to engage in melee. And so these armored Khornes will be absorbing the ammo from the Pink Horrors with their shields and whipping out their pistols again to shoot into the Blue Horrors, as the Ice Witch dumping down one last spell, the Ice Maiden's Kiss, blasting away some of these Blue Horrors, and right after that she'll be routed by the Blue Fire spam from the Herald. On the flank, some Winged Lancers charges valiantly into the Pink Horrors, trying to run them down. Although that exposes them to a bunch of crossfire from the Pink Horrors, I'll be tasting my own medicine as the Pink Horrors just quickly make short work of my remaining cavalry with the numbers advantage and of course the firepower, focusing down my expensive heavy cavalry. Especially with their shield absorbing that charge impact and being decent melee combatant, they managed to drag down quite a few of my riders. Now for the Tzeentch frontline, finally some units have penetrated the Kislev defenses. charging into the Cossars with spears. Finally, a combat they can excel at, cleaving their way through my squishier, lightly armored chaff units. So I'll be supporting this fight with the Little Grom charging into combat. With 40 attack and also extra bonus versus infantry, it will be quite effective in rear charging all these armored Forsaken infantry. Still, there's only one model and there's only so much work it can do, so I'll be pulling back some of the winged lances and flanking and rear charging these Forsakens instead. For the backline of Tzeentch, the pink horrors are still surviving, but they're being bombarded from the flank by the Little Grom. With the wrong side facing their enemy, they're taking extra damage from the penetrating cannon shots. But they have successfully routed off winged lancers, which is a great news for the Tzeentch army, especially now that the balance of power is in the favor of Kislev. They sorely need any kind of advantage they can get. They'll be spamming that blue fire spell again, trying to weaken my Little Grom, and it is quite effective, as you can see. Dropping it down to around half health, even proccing that Barrel Blood effect, stabilizing its leadership. The Warp Fire effect weakening its armor makes it more susceptible to the pink horror missile as well, but unfortunately for them, my armored Cossars are still pushing, now getting into the flanks on these pink horrors. Some of them will be tied down and silenced, while my Little Grom is still dumping those shots into the pink horrors. The problem with the Tzeentch army is that they have a much weaker melee profile, forcing them to take a much slower offense than Khorne and Tzeentch, using those firepower advantage to cover their advance, and that made them pay a dear price, taking massive losses from the overwhelming Kislev firepower. The Screamers a little bit squishier than the Fleshhounds and also less models in a single unit. They are easily counteracted by my spam of Cossars with spears and winged lances, and they were not successful in shutting down artillery at all. Instead, they relied on the blue fire shots to basically snipe out my single entities, and it was not enough, as one of my Little Grom was able to expand basically most of its ammo. Receiving another blue fire shot, well, it's not even taking that much damage, as most of the shot basically missed. And with my infantry pretty much intact with multiple Cossars with spears remaining, and then the Cossars armored version and also the winged lancers running down the pink horrors, the Tzeentch army quickly reach army losses and will be eliminated from battle. Overall, Little Groms are a great unit of artillery with a lot of survivability and some extra melee power that can double as an emergency melee unit, just like how I used this one Little Grom to rear charge some of the Forsaken. And they also have really impressive missile strength with great splash damage, very accurate for a mortar-like artillery with a high firing angle as well. However, the biggest handicap is that they only have a single unit model. That means they have a rather slow damage output. They need a stable and safe environment for expanding their ammo, but if you can give them enough time to use them all up, they can be absolutely worth it, just like how this one Little Grom managed to get 121 kills, though not a lot of damage value, partly because the Tzeentch chaff themselves are not that expensive, so even if you hit them with a lot of artillery shots, you're not getting a lot of value out of it. And more importantly, a lot of that damage got absorbed by the Tzeentch shielding, and the damage was mitigated. But still, Little Groms were great at just eliminating that shielding due to the fact that a Tzeentch unit shares the same shield across the entire unit. So even if it only clips a single unit model on the Screamers, the Little Grom was able to basically knock out the entire shielding of the Tzeentch Screamer unit, which happened around the start of the battle if you remember. And that gave my missile corps, the Cossars, the armored Cossars, and the Cossars with spears to basically shower them with arrows, and without the Tzeentch shield absorbing all those shots, my missile spamming tactic was a lot more effective. As for the mobility, one of the winged lancers was able to eliminate a lot of the Screamer unit by countercharging them. They themselves not having a lot of armor means that the winged lancers will be very effective if they can get a charge onto these squishy demons of Tzeentch. While the Ice Witch basically got sniped heavily by the blue fire spam from the Herald, who got over 2,300 gold worth of damage, while my Ice Witch was only able to get out a single Frost Maiden Kiss, a single Heart of Winter, and a Snow Leopard Summon. And after that, her leadership no longer holds and got routed off the battlefield. While the Tzeentch army led by Rocket Row we have a bunch of blue horrors and pink horrors. They themselves very susceptible to missile spams due to the fact that they do not have the best armor, and Forsaken, some of them got their shield knocked out early by the artillery from the Little Grom. So they are more susceptible to the missile damage as well, with the arrow fire pouring in onto their densely packed formation, while the Screamers, they do not have a lot of good targets to fight other than the winged lances, while the Little Groms are guarded by a bunch of spears, and in the end they took way too much anti-large damage and the crossfire from the spear Khornes as well, so they didn't manage to do a lot of work. Overall, 2 great games from my opponent Rocket Row here. In the first Khorne game, we saw some great use of Fleshhounds, tying down my backline and also hunting down my artillery, silencing them, preventing them from firing into the heavy infantry. While the second battle, we have some really precise sniping from the Herald of Tzeentch, eliminating my leadership early and cutting out my magic support. If we put more focus on aggressive melee units like Forsaken and Spawns of Tzeentch, I probably wouldn't be able to hold back that kind of aggressive rush and would definitely struggle a lot more in battle. Anyways, that's it for today's battle. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do and want to see more, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to keep an eye out on any new video uploads. And if you want to share your battles, feel free to drop by my Discord or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check them out. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.